Good morning. This week's Torah portion, once again, is about Korach and his rebellion against Moses. And our rabbis and ethics of our fathers say that there are two different types of disputes. There are good arguments and there are bad arguments. As we know, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But there's a positive argument and a negative one. The positive one is when it's for the sake of heaven, meaning that the goal is to discover and uncover the truth. So 2 people argue, debate, to gain clarity and insight and come to the correct conclusion. But then there's an argument and a dispute that's driven by ego, by the desire to win, to prove your opponent wrong. And therefore our rabbis say any machloket that is for the sake of heaven will be enduring, will have positive outcomes. And any one that is not for the sake of heaven, but for pride and ego and honor, that will be destructive. What does an example say, the rabbis, of a positive argument and dispute? Says Pirkei Avot, like the dispute of Hillel and Shammai, the 2 great sages in the Talmud. They argued constantly, but always to discover the deeper truth. And therefore, it wasn't a matter of winning or losing, it was a matter of discovering the truth. And even if you were defeated by your opponent's argument, you won because you won the truth. However, the Mishnah says, what is an example of a dispute not for the sake of heaven? Korach and his assembly. And the Khatam Sofer asks the question, just like the positive dispute is Hillel versus Shammai, it should have said a negative dispute is like the dispute of Korach and Moses. Korach versus Moses. Why does it say Korach and his assembly, referring to the 250 men he assembled? And the Khatam Sofer gives us a beautiful answer. He says that, you see, there was no dispute between Korach and Moshe, because Moshe wasn't fighting with anyone. All Moshe wanted was to make peace. He actually called a peace conference. He called Dasan and Aviram to meet with him, and they refused to meet with him. So there were no 2 parties in this argument and dispute. It was a one-sided argument. It's not true that it takes 2 to tangle. Sometimes it takes 1 to tangle. But furthermore, says the Khatam Sofer, the dispute was actually amongst Korach and his own assembly. Because when people argue for the sake of heaven, they're united in their desire to seek the truth. But when it's a quarrel not for the sake of heaven, then even the members who are quarreling are not united amongst themselves. Korach and his own assembly had different agendas, different biases, different goals. They were all each seeking their own self-interest. And so therefore the dispute is actually between Korach and his own members of his assembly. Yesterday Hamas put out a truly sickening video of an Israeli Bedouin that they abducted, who Israeli sources say is mentally ill, crossed over into Gaza, and they show this young man on an oxygen tank and an IV drip, and with his passport, showing that they captured this Israeli. And it's so deplorable and sickening to abduct a mentally ill person and then revel in his suffering and his illness. But when you look at Israel, you have the Israel Defense Forces. In the very name, they say, we're not here to fight, we're here to just protect and defend. It's a one-sided dispute. It's not Israel versus the Palestinians. It's just the Palestinians fighting against Israel. But furthermore, when you look at Hamas, you see that there's so many different factions and different terrorist organizations. There is no one united front. Why? Because each one has its own agenda. Each one's looking for their own glory and power and honor. So you have Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Palestinian Authority, countless terrorist organizations. It's like Korach and his assembly. They're not united amongst themselves because each one is seeking their own power. Last week, there was a wedding in Israel of a young man by the name of Tzur Golden. He married his beautiful bride, Ayala. Tzur Golden is a twin. His brother was Hadar Golden. Hadar Golden in 2014 in Operation Tzuk Eitan, when Hamas built tunnels into Israel, was sent by the IDF to uproot the terrorists. Tragically, he was killed. Young man, 20 years old. Until today, Hamas refuses to give his body back to Israel, to his parents, to at least be able to bury their child. His twin brother got married last week, Tzur Golden. And at the wedding, before he broke the glass, he quoted the verse, which is why we break the glass at a wedding. If I forget the O Jerusalem, may I forget my right hand. May my tongue cling to its palate, if I will not elevate Jerusalem at the height of my joy. And then he said, I always imagined that at my wedding, my twin brother Hadar would lift me on my shoulders to dance. And at his wedding, I would lift him on my shoulders. But sadly, he's not here with us today. And therefore, as we break the glass to remember the destruction of Jerusalem, there's a brokenness in all of our hearts as our beloved brother is not here with us. But surely this is what he would want us to do. He would want us to carry on with our lives, with our families, to build our Jewish nation. And therefore, as I break this glass, I remember my beloved brother. That's the strength, the unity, the love, the compassion of the Jewish people. That is what has sustained us and kept us until this very day. And God willing, ultimately, till the day that goodness prevails over evil. Wishing everyone a Chodesh Tov, a good month of Tammuz. May it bring blessings, health, and healing to each and every one of us.